Hey, everyone, and welcome. Now, I couldn't have said this better myself.
And I do believe that we have rotten politics, and I'm not using that as an exaggeration.
Have a listen to this caller on Talk GB as he lays out the facts so well that even GB News cut him up. Have a listen to this.
Daniel is in Epsom. Hi there, Daniel.
Hi, good morning, Renee. Good morning, Christine.
Good morning.
I just want to say that you were talking about Islamophobia earlier on, and I was sort of thinking to myself, how I think it might be a natural state of mind, because if you think that now in our country, I mean, I'm from London, I'm 47, I grew up in SE21, and when I was a kid, people weren't beaming messages on our Houses of Parliament. We didn't have anti-Jewish and anti-British marches in London. We hadn't imported FGM, honour killing, sham marriage, suicide bombing, the full veil, grooming gangs, all from the Islamic third world. And I think for the past 20 or 30 years, we've been telling our government that we didn't want illegal immigration at all, and we wanted legal immigration cut down to extremely low numbers, because we know on the ground that this is what it leads to. Now the MPs' lives are in danger and they're being harassed, they're kind of catching up with the public. We've seen the degradation. When I was a kid in London in the early 80s, if someone got stabbed or shot, my whole family gathered around the TV. Oh my God, someone got stabbed in Camberwell. It was a shock. Yeah. Now it happens 3 times a day and we don't pay any attention. So we've seen the degradation. We've seen third world immigration ruin the country. If we're looking at crime, for argument's sake, right? Homogenous countries, if you look at the Eurostat figures, homogenous countries have the least amount of crime. So Slovenia, Slovakia, Hungary. I think Poland's got the least amount of crime with the least amount of immigration. You can take examples like Japan. Homogenous countries tend to be more unified, tend to have less crime. I think most people in this country are living in a country they didn't want or ask for or vote for.
Do you think, where has that come from? Do you think that it's come from... because I've had arguments about this with friends who've said, well, actually, you have to blame partly the state for that, because if the state doesn't sanction, if the state doesn't facilitate people integrating and being part of an overriding culture, an overriding feeling of belonging in the UK, then there is some responsibility with the people who move here, but there's also a big responsibility on the state for allowing that to happen. What would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, I'd say if you were an adult before 1997, which I was in my mid to late teens, I think after that date, when Blair got in and intentionally rubbed the noses of the right in diversity, I think after that point, what we invented was multiculturalism, which is a complete lie. What we should be saying at the door, there's 2 factors. Number one, at the door, this is Britain, this is how we operate. If you don't like it, you don't have to live here, okay? And I think the sheer volumes of people... we were talking about maybe a quarter added to the population since the early 90s. I mean, if you think about it this way, in 1951, if you look at the census results, 98.8% of the British public were Christian, spoke English as a first language, and were white, okay? And in less than one man's lifetime, we've had our country completely changed before our eyes, and most people didn't want or ask for it. So no one ever wanted this. I'm from London. I moved out because I didn't want to live there. And most people up and down the country think this way. And also, in the last 7 or 8 general elections, one of the top 3 topics on the doorstep has been immigration. We've asked the government for 10, 20, 30 years. We gave them explicit instructions to stop illegal immigration and bring legal immigration down to low numbers, and they've ignored us, okay? So that's red and blue. So what do we do? How else can we make it clear that we didn't ever want this? How can we were never asked.
I wish you'd called in when Jonathan was here. What an eloquent way to explain how people... Did you? We didn't take calls in that hour, so you weren't ignored. I mean, it's a beautiful way of summarising how people who are actually living outside of the Westminster bubble are feeling, I think.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, Renee. Most people in the UK, I'd imagine, if we had a referendum, would agree with me. But I'm being ignored, OK? I moved out...
And do you think what's happening on the streets when it comes to the... extremism we're seeing in some of that protest, do you think that is how what you're describing has manifested?
Well, absolutely. If you think about it, right, I'm an Englishman that lives in England. I don't know any Israeli Jews. I don't know any Palestinians. I've never met a Russian or a Ukrainian. Why have I got this on my news 24/7? Why are hundreds of thousands of people in my capital city anti-British, anti-Jewish sentiment? I've got nothing to do with it, and I don't want anything to do with it. I don't know why they're protesting in London. If you feel so strong, I like the way that no one ever protested about the Jordanians or the Syrians getting killed. They were Muslims too.
But you're not against the concept of protesting. You're against the way in which the protests are taking place.
Yeah, I'm not against the concept of protest.
Because I have no problem if someone wants to go and stand in London and protest what's happening, whether you agree with them or not. That's a fundamental right. It's when it spills over to extremism, I think it's an issue. Would you think that's fair?
Now that's out and out deflection. I would have replied to that one. Yes, but if you went to a march that had extremists inside of it, and then you went back the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week, would you not then be complicit, i.e. every single person on the march, complicit with extremism? Because that's what it is.
Yeah, but it's just one prong on the comb. I mean, I listed everything that exists in the UK now that didn't exist 50, 60 years ago. All
right, Daniel, got to go, but thank you.
Thank you.
And in response to what, just interestingly, because I saw it flash up on the news before, the Muslim Council of Britain responded to what Rishi Sunak had said about
of course they did.
All of that. Saying that his speech not only attempted to smear hundreds of thousands of protesters calling for peace in Gaza, it was peppered with ill-defined warnings of extremism from Islamists and the far right. We await to see how the government will expand its definition of extremism and whether they would also cover large swathes of the Conservative Party leadership who have directed divisive and hateful rhetoric against Muslims and the large portion of party's membership with conspiratorial views about Muslims. The same people would choose to consider mainstream, diverse and democratic British Muslim representative bodies as extremist is particularly ironic. So that's what they had to say.
And that is the example of how they shut down conversation.
Now, it's all well and good for the ladies to say we're getting cut off and we're not allowed to talk about it, but then he does exactly the same to the caller, doesn't he? Cuts him off before he can say the list again. Well said to him. I'd like to know your opinion on this. Do you think he's right? Do you think he's wrong? Do you think Christo's right or wrong? Do you think Renee is right or wrong? I'd like to know your opinion. Well said to him though, isn't it? Stay sane. I'll see you on the next one.